Most people think they understand evil. They think it looks like something obvious. But in 1968, in a quiet part of Newcastle, England, something happened that completely broke that idea. Because the person accused of killing two young boys was not a man, not a stranger, not even an adult. It was an 11-year-old girl. And what makes this case even more disturbing is what the courtroom never heard. Her name was Mary Bell, and by the time she went on trial, she was already being called something the British justice system had never dealt with before. A child accused of killing other children. But here's the question that still divides people today. Was Mary Bell born dangerous? Or was she shaped into something no child should ever become? Because the answer depends on one thing, something the court never properly examined. It started in May 1968. A young boy went out like any other day. A short walk, a simple errand, nothing unusual. But he never made it home. Later, his body was discovered in an abandoned building. At first, doctors couldn't explain what happened. There were no clear external injuries, no obvious cause, just confusion. So, officially, the case went cold in its early hours. But it wasn't random, and it wasn't unsolved for long. Weeks passed. Life continued. People tried to move on. Then it happened again. Another child, another disappearance, another tragic discovery. But this time, something was different. The police noticed patterns, strange details, small inconsistencies. And then came something even more disturbing. Messages. Written notes were found in the area. Childlike handwriting. Simple words, but deeply unsettling. They suggested knowledge that no ordinary child should have had. And suddenly, what looked like two isolated tragedies started to look connected. Investigators began looking closer at the neighborhood, at who was present, at who kept appearing near the incidents. And then, they focused on a group of local children. Among them was an 11-year-old girl, Mary Bell. At first, it seemed impossible. Too small, too young, too unlikely. But the more they looked, the more she appeared at the center of key moments. Until eventually, the case shifted in a direction no one expected. The suspect wasn't a stranger. It was a child. When Mary Bell went to trial in December 1968, the courtroom faced a problem it had no language for. How do you judge an 11-year-old for crimes like this? 4 psychiatrists examined her. They described her personality in clinical terms: detached, manipulative, lacking empathy. They used a word that followed her for life: psychopathic traits. But here's where the story takes a turn. Because those experts never heard the full picture. There was something the court never properly examined. Something that was not fully introduced as evidence. Mary's home life. Her early childhood. The environment she grew up in. Years later, accounts would suggest a deeply unstable upbringing. Neglect, abandonment, severe trauma during her formative years. But none of this was fully presented to the psychiatrists evaluating her. They were judging her in isolation, as if she had emerged from nowhere. And that raises a difficult question. How accurate can a psychological diagnosis be when half the story is missing? The judge faced an impossible decision. There was no facility in the country designed for a child like this. No clear precedent. no roadmap. So instead of prison in the traditional sense, Mary Bell was detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, a legal phrase meaning indefinite custody. She would grow up inside the system, not as a free child, not as a typical offender, but as something the system didn't know how to classify. And the public was left with a question that still lingers today. Was this simply a story of a dangerous child? Or was it a story of a child shaped by things no one intervened in early enough? Because depending on what you believe, the entire meaning of this case changes. And that's what keeps people discussing it decades later. Not just what happened, but what was never fully understood at the time. Years later, psychologists, journalists, and researchers would revisit the case again and again, trying to answer one question: could this have been prevented? Or was it already too late, long before anyone noticed? And maybe the most unsettling part is that we still don't fully agree on the answer.